This odd-looking SUV is Mazda's first crack at the EV landscape. It's the MX-30 Electric, and we've been living with this one for 3 months to find out whether it's worth your consideration over an expanding list of EV rivals. Now, this was a long-term review, so make sure to check out our written content over at carsguide.com.au. It goes into sort of the detail of the day-to-day, what it's like to live with one of these cars and what it's like to live with an EV generally. If you are watching on YouTube and you are enjoying our reviews as well, remember to hit those like, subscribe, and bell notification icons. Now, this review will be split into our 8 review categories. You'll see those on your screen now. Feel free to scrub ahead, or if you're watching on YouTube, they'll be in the description or the timeline below. First up, let's take a look at pricing and specs so you can get a feel for where this car sits. Now, the value equation is quite different for EVs because you have to consider things like battery size, the amount of available range, and the charging capability, as well as your usual value considerations for the price. And sadly, no matter which way you cut it, the MX-30 is still a tall order. Wearing a before on-roads price tag of $65,490, the MX-30 is expensive, but it's not as though that cost is sunk into a huge battery, with this little SUV providing just 200 kilometers of driving range between charges. That's right, for significantly more money than entry-level versions of Tesla's Model 3, Hyundai's Kona Electric, or the Polestar 2, you're hamstrung with less than half the range. The MX-30 has other attributes which fall short of what its rivals offer too, but thankfully it's not all bad news. For a Mazda at least, this little SUV carries pretty much all the gear. Only available in the top-spec Astina trim level, the MX-30 E35 gets cool-looking 18-inch wheels, a slick 8.8-inch multimedia panel with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connectivity, a 7-inch semi-digital dash cluster, a very nice 12-speaker Bose audio system, single-zone climate control, heated front seats, a head-up display, a sunroof, and keyless entry with push-start ignition. Notably missing at the MX-30's tall price tag is a power-adjustable passenger front seat, a wireless phone charger, and dual-zone climate. One item the MX-30 has, which I'd like to see more of in EVs, is a full-size domestic power outlet under the dash. EVs have such high-voltage batteries, to me this one is a no-brainer. Straight away, you'll notice its stout nose with all sorts of complex three-dimensional details. And as it turns out, this previewed the brand's evolved Kodo design language, which we now see on the larger CX-50. I think the lines and details which run down this car's body are also more interesting than the hatch-like simplicity that we see on its CX-30 and Mazda 3 siblings. Round the rear, you get a coupe-like roofline in the case of our car with contrast grey panelwork, which leads down into a hunched-over hatch and sporty LED light fittings. The MX-30's real party trick, though, is its so-called suicide doors, that is, rear doors which open backwards. This means the MX-30 can have rear access without the need for an external door handle, helping to really sell that paired backside profile. Onlookers will love this feature, but while it might seem amazing to look at, it creates some practicality issues which we'll look at in a second. The inside of the MX-30 really takes on a unique character and trades away Mazda's predictable but nice interior appointments with something really different. Here in the doors, you get this interesting carpet trim, and there's highlights throughout the cabin, all done in a sort of recycled cork material. Mazda's also put these interesting brown finished vintage Maztex plush leather finishes on the doors and anywhere that your elbows are likely to touch. And that runs into the seats, which also have a primary denim pattern, which is surprisingly quite comfortable and seems pretty hard wearing as well. Finally, there's this interesting panel which is used for the climate control. It's a totally separate screen from the multimedia system, and that really helps to set the MX-30's cabin apart from other Mazdas in the range. So it all looks really interesting and unique, but is it actually practical? Let's take a look. The MX-30 is a concept car by design, and I really do think it's a concept car by nature as well. The most puzzling thing here is Mazda has managed to make a small SUV feel about as practical as its MX-5 sports car. That having been said, I think for front passengers, practicality is pretty good in here. There's big pockets in the doors, suitable for our large CarsGuide bottle. There are also these little trick flaps for the bottle holders. You can either have a cork-clad tray or a bottle holder, again, large enough for our largest CarsGuide bottle. There's a center console box, decent adjustability for the seats and the wheel as well. There's also a large cutaway underneath where this car really leans into its EV underpinnings. It's somewhere where there might normally be a transmission tunnel, but here in this car, there's a large storage area with your USB outlets and a full-size power socket as well. Where it's not so good is the usability of its climate functions and the multimedia system. This climate panel, while it looks cool, it is a little bit too far away from the road. You do have to take your eyes off of the road to use it properly. But that having been said, it does have some convenient shortcut buttons that run down the side, so you don't have to interact with that touch panel too much. The other unfortunate thing is the multimedia system is controlled via this dial here. If you've used a Mazda before, you'll be familiar with it. It's fine for the stock software, which is relatively simple and therefore easy to navigate using this system, but where it falls down is your phone connectivity. These new phone mirroring softwares are just designed for touch panels and not for a dial. Yes, the clamshell door effect looks really cool. It opens like so, but to clamber in, it's actually really clumsy because not only do you have to reach around to get that inside door handle, you have to come around here like so. Then what I have to do is avoid hitting my head on this anchor point for the rear door here, really scrunch myself up behind my own seating position and get in there. Not as easy as it looks, and now that I'm behind here, I barely have any room for my knees behind my own driving position. Now, not only do I really not have enough room back here, but it feels extra claustrophobic because of all these dark trims in the roof and down these tiny little windows here. Now, storage, that's actually surprisingly okay. There's a little pocket down in that rear door that somehow holds the large CarsGuide bottle, a drop-down armrest as well, which is clad in a nice soft trim too, which again, fits the large bottle, points there, but where it falls down, there's no power outlets back here and no adjustable air vents either. Although from this position, I get adjustable buttons so I can let myself out a bit easier. The boot isn't great, with a genuinely sports car sized space on offer. This will fit the two smaller of our 3 CarsGuide travel cases, or only the largest one as seen here. Upsettingly, and despite a small motor, the MX-30 also doesn't get a frunk. Let's look at that motor now. Now, the MX-30 is front drive only, powered by an electric motor with power figures you'll see on your screen now. Those do seem kind of low, but as we'll explore in a second, they're not as bad as they seem on paper. The MX-30 can only drive around 200 kilometers on a full charge, which in Australia is basically nothing. It really does constrain owners largely to a life within city limits, and because of that, it's really best suited to be a second vehicle for someone who never really needs to do intercity drives. This car's short range is because it has a relatively tiny 35.5 kilowatt-hour battery pack. Mazda says this helps keep weight down though, which helps this car maintain the brand's signature drive experience. Because of this small battery, it charges on a DC fast charger very quickly. Mazda says you can expect 37 minutes on a 50 kilowatt European Type 2 combo charger you see here. Upsettingly, it charges very slowly on AC at just 6.6 kilowatts. This means around 6 hours to charge, and to me, that's really not good enough. You need to charge this car a lot. If Mazda had the forethought to give it an 11 kilowatt AC inverter, you could convenience charge it in nearly half the time. As for the MX-30's energy efficiency, the official combined number is 18.9 kilowatt hours to 100 kilometers. However, over nearly 1,500 kilometers and 3 months of commuting in this one, I landed on a better number of 16.4 kilowatt hours to 100 kilometers. Better still, as the battery is so small and I ended up mainly relying on free AC charging, it cost me just $10.52 for the 2 instances where I had to use a paid DC fast charger. So all those compromises that Mazda has made when it comes to the range and charging capability of this car, do they really make a difference for how it drives behind the wheel as they claim? I'm pleased to report that actually it does. The MX-30 is quite unique for an electric car in that it doesn't really feel any different to drive from its combustion equivalents. It does feel nice and light. You don't have that weighty feeling that you get from a lot of EV models. And that means that that signature Mazda driving experience is all maintained really nicely. That goes down into this car's ride, its handling, it's all there. All the Mazda stuff that you've come to know and love if you've driven one of these cars before is maintained. The steering is excellent, really organic, nothing artificial about it like there is in its rivals like Tesla or even Hyundai to a degree. There's a nice quality of ride that even though this car has a torsion bar at the rear, you could have tricked me. It feels genuinely like it has a multi-link. It is that good at handling. And that motor as well, while it does have low power outputs on paper, it sounds like it's going to be very compromised, it actually holds up really well. Now this probably has to do with some combination of how light this car is and also how instantly responsive an electric motor is. But with such low power figures on offer, I'm surprised to find how sporty and engaging the MX-30 is to drive. Now, while those lower power figures on offer do mean that the MX-30 isn't as much of an athlete as most of its rivals, that doesn't take away from how fun it is from behind the wheel, especially at the kind of commuter speeds that this car is really designed for. It really is one of the more fun EVs to drive on the road, just from that complete experience of the steering, just enough power from the motor, and nothing being too stiff or firm or artificial. Nicely done. I also really like the size of this car. I find this car is really nicely suited to the inside of a city. It's kind of that perfect small SUV Goldilocks zone where it fits in small car spaces and just genuinely feels really easy to maneuver around tight city streets. Now that's also boosted by the fact that you've got a surround view camera, which is one of the better ones that I've ever used. Visibility for the front sort of quadrant is quite good. Like all current Mazdas on sale, we've explained this in other Mazda reviews as well, the mirrors are really close because they're mounted on the door frame here, and they seem to have a little bit of a zoom factor on them. So your aperture for seeing out the rear of the car is actually quite limited through these mirrors, which again is a bit of a shame. Now, what about this car's features as an EV? We've basically covered how it feels to drive as a Mazda SUV, and those functions are genuinely pretty good. But as an EV, it's actually quite interesting. You have a few adjustability functions in here. So paddle shifters, like some of its rivals, will adjust the amount of regen braking on offer. You can paddle it down 2 levels to max out your regen braking. Unfortunately, I do feel like when you're at that maximum regen setting, it's not a setting that will take you to a full stop just with the motor alone. And it doesn't feel like it has quite enough bite to be saving you the most amount of energy every time you slow down. So I think there's room for improvement there, but that having been said, the consumption on our 3-month-long test hasn't been too bad either. Now, at the opposite end of the spectrum, if you paddle shift up, there are actually 2 modes of anti-regen braking, let's say. When you paddle it up, it'll pretty much unleash the ability that this electric motor has on offer. In the top setting, it removes regen entirely. It won't even attempt to slow the car down with the motor at all, and it does make this motor crazy responsive. It doesn't have quite enough power to make it super fast, but it will make the torque be delivered so quickly that it will overwhelm these little front tires at a moment's notice. So where does that leave us after 3 months behind the wheel of the MX-30? Well, I think actually if you keep it in its comfort zone of driving around a city, there's a lot to like. It has a really kind of smooth electric drivetrain thanks to that gradual onset of power and the gradual onset of the regen. It's quite pleasant to just drive around the confines of city traffic, for example. And when you do want to really have a go of it, it can genuinely be quite fun, with Mazda having gone to lengths to maintain that driving experience. And when you do want to really have a go of it, it can genuinely be quite fun, with Mazda having gone to lengths to maintain that driving experience. Is it worth the trade-off for the range? I would say probably not. For an electric car in Australia, 200 kilometers of range is basically nothing. So I think you need a car that has around about 400 kilometers of range to really make an EV make sense if you are traveling into city. But that having been said, if you're using this as a second car, keeping it in its comfort zone, it is an interesting and fun car to drive. Being only available in that top Astina trim, the MX-30 Electric has a very impressive safety suite. Active items include auto emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection, as well as junction assist, blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert, rear auto braking, lane keep assist with lane departure warning, adaptive cruise control, traffic sign recognition, and driver attention alert. As has become expected from Mazda, this is a top-tier safety fit-out, and it even somehow packs 10 airbags in its tiny cabin. The cruise and brake support systems have proven to be great in my time with the car, but one thing I did notice was the blind spot monitoring seems to not really line up with this car's blind spot. It detects too far back, like it was meant for a bigger car, when this vehicle's blind spot is right up close thanks to that roofline and those cropped-in mirrors. Like the rest of the Mazda range, the MX-30 is covered by a 5-year and unlimited kilometre warranty, and the battery pack is also covered by an industry-standard 8-year warranty. Servicing is cheap too, as it should be for an electric vehicle, coming in at an average of $255 a year. The MX-30 will need to visit a Mazda service location once every 12 months or 15,000 Ks, whichever occurs first. As a mainstream EV offering, the MX-30 is really hard to justify, especially considering its tall price, limited range, and compromised practicality. It's a real shame because it is like a concept car come to life. We love its commitment to its unique design, its luxurious interior appointments, and that signature drive experience. What do you think? Is there a niche for the MX-30, or should you consider something more like a Hyundai Kona EV, Polestar 2, or Model 3? Tell us what you think in the comments below.